It was a typical Tuesday morning, just like any other. The sky was clear, the air had a slight chill, and the sun was beginning to rise, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood. I stood at the edge of the driveway, watching my daughter, Sarah, ready to board the school bus. She was dressed in her usual school uniform, her bright eyes sparkling with excitement. It was one of those mornings where everything felt calm and normal, almost too normal. Sarah, despite being in a wheelchair due to her cerebral palsy, was always full of energy and positivity. She had this unshakable spirit, a joy that could light up the room. While other children might find it challenging to go through their daily routines, Sarah faced every task with a smile, turning every moment into an opportunity for laughter and fun. To see her in that wheelchair, you wouldn't think for a second that she was anything but capable. Each day was a journey, whether it was her struggle to get dressed in the morning or the small victories of getting herself to school on time. But she didn't just manage, she thrived. It was incredible how she found a way to make everything seem effortless. She never let her condition define her, and neither did I. In my eyes, she was just like any other child, with her own dreams, hopes, and challenges. This particular morning, as I watched Sarah wheel herself to the bus stop, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I gave her a quick hug and kiss on the cheek, as I always did. "Have a good day, sweetie," I said with a smile. "I'll be right here when you get home." She grinned up at me, her face beaming with the kind of joy only a child can have, and nodded enthusiastically. She was ready for school, and I was ready to send her off with a heart full of love and confidence. But as the bus approached, something felt different. At first, I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. The sound of the bus engine, the usual chatter of the other kids, everything seemed off just a little. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself that I was just being overly cautious, as any parent would be. After all, there was no reason to worry. This was just another regular day in our lives, and nothing bad was going to happen. As Sarah reached the bus, she turned back to wave at me, her small hand raised in the air. I waved back, but before I could turn to head inside, I noticed a woman standing at the far side of the bus stop, just outside the group of children. She was pacing back and forth, her eyes scanning the area. Her presence seemed out of place, like she didn't belong there. I tried to brush it off as just another parent waiting for their child, but there was something unsettling about her. Her movements were jerky, agitated, as though she was waiting for something or someone. She was staring directly at the bus, and then at Sarah. I tried not to pay too much attention, but a feeling of unease crept up my spine. I couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't quite right. The bus doors opened, and Sarah was the first aboard. She was always excited to get on, always eager to start her day. But today, the woman's gaze followed Sarah's every move. I couldn't see her face clearly from where I stood, but I saw the way her eyes locked onto Sarah's wheelchair. My heart began to race, and I suddenly felt a deep sense of foreboding. My mind was screaming at me to go over and check on her, but I told myself, "It's fine. She's just another parent." But as the bus doors closed behind Sarah, I felt an undeniable sense of fear, as though something was going to happen that I couldn't control. I forced myself to take a breath and turned to head back into the house. My heart was still pounding, but I tried to convince myself that everything would be fine. I told myself that I was just being paranoid, that there was no reason to worry. The bus pulled away, and I watched Sarah wave from the window as she disappeared down the road. The sound of the engine faded, and I stood there for a moment, staring down the street. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that today was different. Little did I know, that was the last time I would see my daughter safe and sound for what felt like an eternity. This extended version explores the sense of normalcy and deep connection between the mother and daughter, while gradually building tension as something ominous approaches. It helps set the stage for the events that unfold, showing how quickly a peaceful morning can turn into something terrifying. The feelings of unease, parental love, and the impending danger are amplified as the narrative progresses. As I stood by the driveway, watching the familiar yellow school bus approach, I felt a strange shift in the atmosphere. The air was still, and everything about that moment seemed a little too quiet. The usual sound of children's laughter, the chatter, and the excited rush to get on the bus was absent. Instead, there was a stillness, an almost eerie calm that surrounded me. I looked at the bus as it rolled down the street, but my attention was quickly drawn to something else, something that felt out of place. At the bus stop, there was a woman. She was pacing back and forth, taking long, hurried steps that made her seem restless. The way she moved, almost agitated, caught my attention immediately. She wasn't interacting with any of the other parents standing around. In fact, it almost seemed like she was intentionally staying to the side, keeping herself separate from the group. Her eyes darted from the bus to the children, but I couldn't figure out why she seemed so focused on them. Her movements were erratic, as though she was waiting for something, or more accurately, someone. She kept glancing at the bus as it neared, her eyes following it, scanning each child as they lined up to board. But then, her gaze fixed onto one particular child, my daughter Sarah. I could feel a cold shiver run down my spine as I watched her eyes lock onto Sarah in that wheelchair. It was as if she had a singular target in mind, and that target was my daughter. I tried to shake the uneasy feeling that began creeping into my chest. Maybe she was just a new parent, someone who didn't quite know where to stand or what to do. But the look on her face, the way her eyes narrowed as she stared at Sarah, was too unsettling to ignore. There was something in her expression, something I couldn't quite define, that made me uneasy. She looked like a woman who was frustrated, perhaps even angry. But why? Why would she be looking at my daughter in such a way? I continued watching her, trying to rationalize her presence. Maybe she was just waiting for another child to get off the bus, or perhaps she was lost in thought, and her frustration had nothing to do with Sarah at all. But the longer I stood there, the more I realized that I couldn't shake the feeling that this woman had been watching us for longer than I had noticed. I had never seen her before, and something about her just didn't feel right. As the bus pulled up to the curb, I tried to calm myself. I told myself that everything would be fine. I had watched this bus stop routine unfold 100 times before. I was used to the bus arriving, the children boarding, and the usual rush of excited goodbyes. Nothing about this particular morning should have been different. But there she was, still pacing back and forth, her eyes now trained on Sarah. It was as if she were waiting for the moment when my daughter would roll her way up the ramp and into the bus. Sarah's wheelchair was positioned at the front of the line, as it usually was. She had always been one of the first to board, and she was so independent, handling her own chair with ease. I could see her smiling up at the driver as she made her way to the front of the line. She was excited, as always, to head off to school and see her friends. She waved back at me, her face full of joy and energy. But as Sarah started moving toward the bus, the woman's pacing quickened. I could see her fidgeting, her frustration growing. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, and her eyes never left Sarah. At that moment, a small knot of fear began to form in my stomach. Something in my gut told me this wasn't just a coincidence, and I couldn't help but wonder if this woman had something to do with my daughter. But why? And what did she want? The bus doors opened, and Sarah was the first to roll up the ramp. I felt a tightness in my chest as I watched her approach the bus, my protective instincts kicking in. I glanced back at the woman, who had now stopped pacing, but her gaze was still fixed firmly on Sarah. She seemed almost mesmerized, her expression twisted in a way that was hard to decipher. Just then, the bus driver gave Sarah a friendly wave as she climbed aboard, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. The woman, still standing there, made no move to interact with the other children or parents, her focus entirely on Sarah as the bus slowly pulled away. It wasn't until the bus was halfway down the block that she took one last, lingering look at the vehicle before turning and walking away. I stood frozen for a few moments, watching her retreating figure. Something was definitely wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Why had she been so focused on my daughter? And what was it about her that made me feel so uneasy? I tried to push the thoughts from my mind, telling myself that I was overthinking things, but the feeling of dread didn't leave me. As I walked back to the house, I couldn't shake the sense that something was off. It wasn't just a strange woman. It was the feeling that had settled deep inside me, the one that told me that the world I thought I knew, the one where my daughter was safe, had just been shattered. It was only a matter of time before I would learn just how much my world was about to change. Everything happened in a split second, but to me, it felt like time had stopped. The sounds of the world around me faded into a muffled blur. My eyes were locked on Sarah as she carefully maneuvered her wheelchair up the ramp to the school bus. She was so focused, her small hands gripping the wheels with determination as she made her way toward the door. I could see her smile through the window, waving at me one last time before she entered, as if this were just any other normal morning. But what happened next would haunt me forever. Without warning, the woman, who had been pacing just moments before, lunged forward with startling speed. Her body seemed to move with an intensity one hadn't expected, and she darted toward the bus like a predator, her face twisted in an expression of pure fury. My heart slammed in my chest as I watched her shout something at the bus driver. The words were unintelligible, lost in the distance and the chaos of what was unfolding, but I knew one thing for sure: something was horribly wrong. The bus driver, startled and clearly confused, hesitated, but before he could react, the woman pushed her way forward, now directly in front of the bus. She had no fear in her eyes, just an unsettling determination that sent a chill down my spine. And then, as if in slow motion, I saw her reach into her coat, pull out a weapon, and point it directly at the bus. My breath caught in my throat. A sickening wave of disbelief washed over me. What was she doing? What was happening? It felt like my entire body had turned to stone. I could barely move, barely process what I was witnessing. The woman didn't hesitate. She pulled the trigger, and the sound of gunfire exploded in the air. It was like a thunderclap had gone off right in front of me, deafening and terrifying. I didn't even have time to scream or shout. My mind was frozen, struggling to comprehend the madness that was unfolding right before my eyes. The bullets hit the bus with terrifying precision, striking the windows and the metal body, sending shards of glass flying in every direction. I could hear the cries of children from inside the bus as the sound of more shots rang out. I glanced frantically at Sarah, who was still just a few feet away from the bus doors. She had no idea what was happening. The horror of the moment hit me all at once. My heart pounded in my chest as I screamed, my voice barely audible over the chaos. "Sarah, get inside, get inside." But it was too late. Another shot rang out, this time much closer, and I watched in horror as the woman's gunfire began to target the bus directly. The children inside were in a state of panic, their screams echoing through the bus. Sarah, still on the ramp, was now in clear danger. I could see her, her wheelchair halfway up the ramp, eyes wide with confusion. She didn't understand what was happening, but she must have heard the shots and seen the chaos unfolding around her. My body moved on instinct. I couldn't think. I just reacted. I rushed forward, adrenaline fueling my every step as I screamed at the woman. "Stop! Please stop!" But it was no use. The woman was too focused, her face contorted with anger as she continued to fire. I could see Mr. Thompson, the bus driver, trying to close the doors. He was frantically pushing buttons, trying to secure the bus, but it wasn't happening fast enough. I could only watch helplessly, frozen to the spot, my heart in my throat. Then, in a final, horrifying moment, I saw the woman's eyes lock onto Sarah. The look she gave her was filled with something cold, something sinister. My blood ran cold as I realized with a gut-wrenching certainty that she was aiming directly at my daughter. No, in that moment, my mind went into overdrive. Everything around me was happening too fast, but I had no choice but to move. I reached out toward Sarah, my heart screaming in terror as I ran toward the ramp. But before I could reach her, Mr. Thompson, in an act of sheer instinct and courage, slammed the bus doors shut with a force that sent a jolt through the air. The woman's arm was still outstretched, her gun still raised, but now the doors were closed. The bus screeched away, its tires spinning as it took off, tearing away from the chaos as quickly as it had arrived. I was left standing there, watching in utter disbelief as the woman stood still in the middle of the road, her weapon still in her hand, eyes still burning with fury. The silence that followed was suffocating. My legs were weak, and I could hardly breathe. I felt a strange detachment from the world around me, as though I had just witnessed a nightmare unfold in real life. And in a way I had. The nightmare wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. But the bus was safe. Sarah was safe. For now. I collapsed to the ground, unable to stand any longer. My hands trembled as I tried to steady myself, the overwhelming fear still gripping my chest. The image of that woman, of the gunfire, of my daughter standing there, so close to danger, replayed in my mind over and over. It would haunt me for the rest of my life. The moment the gunshots rang out, everything descended into madness. The sharp, deafening cracks of the bullets as they hit the bus pierced the air like a violent storm. I froze, my heart racing, and my mind struggling to process what was happening before my eyes. It felt like time had slowed down, each second stretching endlessly as I tried to comprehend the horror unfolding in front of me. The school bus, which had been a symbol of safety and routine, suddenly became a scene of pure chaos. The tires screeched as Mr. Thompson, the driver, slammed on the brakes, trying to keep control of the vehicle. The bus jerked violently to a stop, and I could hear the sickening sound of metal scraping against metal as the bus skidded slightly on the pavement. Inside the bus, the atmosphere was pure pandemonium. The children's screams filled the air, rising in a collective, terrified chorus. "Mom," I heard Sarah's voice faintly from inside, though she couldn't have known what was really happening. She didn't understand the danger. Her innocent mind could only process the loud noises, the fear, and the sudden chaos. My heart shattered as I imagined the terror she must have felt. I looked desperately through the bus windows, trying to catch a glimpse of my daughter, hoping to see her smiling face, the one that always seemed to light up even the darkest days. But this time, all I could see was the reflection of the chaos surrounding her. The children were scrambling in their seats, some of them crying, others covering their ears, unable to make sense of the violent interruption in their normal school day. Some were crouching under their seats, trembling, while others clung to the arms of the seats in front of them for dear life. I felt utterly helpless. Every instinct inside me screamed to protect Sarah, to somehow shield her from the chaos and the danger she was now trapped in. But I was powerless, just a helpless observer standing at the curb, miles away from the safety of the bus. I wanted to run toward her, to rush onto that bus, and pull her out of harm's way. But I couldn't move. I felt as if the world around me had turned into a nightmare, one where I was helpless to do anything but watch. Inside the bus, Sarah's face was visible through the window, and it broke my heart to see the confusion and fear written all over her expression. She had no idea what was going on. She was just a little girl trying to get to school. She sat by the window, looking around, her hands gripping the arms of her wheelchair in a way that was both calm and confused. The noise of the gunshots and the screams of the other children hadn't fully registered in her mind yet, but she could feel the tension building. I saw her eyes flicker, her gaze shifting toward the front of the bus, where the driver was now shouting and trying to regain control. Then, in an instant, everything felt like it was falling apart. The woman, still outside, was still firing, and the bullets were now ricocheting off the bus's exterior, making it feel as if the entire vehicle was under siege. The glass of the windows cracked, sending spiderweb-like fractures across the bus. But somehow, the glass held strong. The sound of bullets hitting metal and shattering glass was so loud, so surreal, that it felt like the world around me had been completely turned upside down. "Sarah!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, my voice lost in the noise, but my heart screamed for her. I could barely hear myself over the terror that was unfolding. My feet felt rooted to the ground as I watched the bus rocking from the impact, the children inside being thrown about in their seats. I imagined what it must have been like for Sarah. She, too, was in a fragile position, sitting by the window where the glass had cracked. Her wheelchair, typically a source of mobility and freedom, was now a potential danger, making it harder for her to move or react. What if the windows shattered completely? What if a bullet found its mark? The possibilities terrified me. I could see her glancing around, searching for answers, her little face confused and scared. For a moment, I thought I saw her turning toward the door, as if she were trying to leave the bus or make sense of the chaos. But just as quickly, the situation shifted again. Mr. Thompson, in a split-second decision, pushed the bus into reverse, lurching the vehicle backward to put more distance between the bus and the woman firing outside. The tire screeched once more, and the children inside were pushed back into their seats with the force of the movement. The bus door, still open, quickly slammed shut as Mr. Thompson made another frantic attempt to pull the bus away. He was clearly trying to get the bus to safety, but the woman outside wasn't giving up. Her shots continued, each one a reminder of how close danger really was. I saw the terror in Sarah's eyes through the window, and every fiber of my being screamed in agony. I was frozen, paralyzed with fear and helplessness, wishing that I could do something, anything, to protect her. The minutes felt like hours as the bus continued to move, but I knew we weren't out of danger yet. The terrifying images of Sarah, so close to the chaos, would stay with me forever.